Hello and welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Handan in Seoul. North Korea commemorated its 76th Foundation Day with large-scale outdoor celebrations and tributes to its late founder, Kim Il-sung, on the eve of the occasion. Amid speculations of a possible military provocation marking the day, the North continued its trash balloon campaign, flying hundreds of them across the border to the south over the weekend for the 13th time this year. This while South Korea and the United States intensified efforts to strengthen nuclear deterrence through high-level talks and joint simulations, actions which Pyongyang slammed as nuclear blackmail. Let's talk more about these stories and their implications to security dynamics in the region with our regular commentator, Dr. Myong-hyun, who joins me in the studio. It's always great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
And also with us tonight is Dr. Nilsson-Wright, head of Japan and Korea's program at University of Cambridge's Center for Geopolitics. It's great to see you again.
Lovely to be back, as always.
All right, Dr. Go, let's kick things off with you. So North Korea is keeping up the festive mood to mark the state's Foundation Day. It held large outdoor events yesterday, and high-ranking officials also paid a visit to the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun to pay their tribute to state founder Kim Il-sung. But Kim Jong-un didn't show up. What are you reading into this, and also the how Pyongyang celebrated the day overall?
Well, you know, this year marked the 76th anniversary of North Korea's State Foundation Day. So I think, the North Korea did was last year, they really gave a large scale of festivities celebrating this day. And because in North Korea, by tradition, they mark anniversaries that are multiple of 5 years with a special care and attention. So last year, happened to be the 75th anniversary of the State Foundation. So incidentally, North Korea was founded back in 1948. And North Korea had like a major air show, some parades and so forth. So I think Kim Jong-un might have thought that this year they could scale down the celebration a little bit, as well as his personal involvement in the festivities, as well as a commemoration. And this could be one of the reasons why Kim Jong-un decided to not attend, for instance, the gathering at the Kumsusan Palace, where the remains of the founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, as well as his father's remain money family and preserved there for exhibition. So I think that must have been the reason. Nothing politically significant in that sense. Could be just been essentially Kim Jong-un tried to attach the right amount of attention, not too much, not too little. Maybe this explains why overall the celebration has been scaled down, as well as Kim Jong-un's level of personal appearance today. Yesterday, sorry.
So for those reasons, that's why it was scaled down a little compared to last year. But we still have other big days coming up, right? Like the foundation anniversary of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party on October 10th. And also we also have the November U.S. elections coming up. So we will have to continue keeping a close eye on the North in the next few months. Dr. Nilsson-Wright, North Korea sent a delegation to South Asian nations, namely Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, ahead of the Foundation Day, but not to China. Chinese President Xi Jinping did send a congratulatory message, though, to Kim Jong-un. What's your take on reports that Pyongyang-Beijing relations are starting to see cracks?
Well, first of all, I suppose we need to underscore the extent to which Kim Jong-un recognizes the benefits of being seen to be increasingly active on the global stage. On the back, of course, of his meetings with President Putin, the latest meeting in Pyongyang, of course. And there's no doubt that I think from the point of view of Kim Jong-un, whether in terms of his ego or in terms of strengthening his links with authoritarian regimes, this is a new game for him. As for the question of China, yes, it's true that Xi Jinping has announced that the Chinese will be seeking to develop a more strategic cooperation, but there's no doubt that there has been real tension between the two countries. It was not that long ago, of course, that the meeting in Busan of the trilateral summit between Chinese, Japanese, and South Korean leaders provoked a somewhat hostile rhetorical response from the DPRK, And the speculation was that Kim was antagonized by the appearance of the Chinese aligning with the Japanese and the South Koreans in their statement supporting the idea of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. That obviously conflicts very much with Kim's own aspirations, given the strength of North Korea's nuclear arsenal. It also, I think, is important to recognize the extent to which, from Beijing's perspective, however much there is a formal alliance relationship with the North Koreans, sealed, of course, in the context of the Cold War and obviously on the back of the experience of the Korean War, there's no doubt that a more provocative, if not belligerent, North Korea is a real strategic concern for the Chinese because it provides a pretext, if one were needed, for other countries in the region, South Korea and Japan, to increase their military capabilities and to strengthen important trilateral cooperation with the United States. That's very much at odds with China's own interests. There have been reports also that China is calling for the return of large numbers of North Korean laborers who work in China, somewhere in the region of 10,000. That's, if you like, implementing an earlier UN decision that dates from 2017, delayed because of COVID. It will be interesting to watch to see how far that goes. Another, if you like, circumstantial evidence suggests that the bilateral relationship between Beijing and Pyongyang is not as strong as it could be, has been the relative absence of high-level visits between leaders of the two countries and senior officials. It was back in 2019 that Xi Jinping visited Pyongyang. There has been no follow-up visit since then by the Chinese leader. And of course, all of this is happening in a context where North Korea has made very clear that its primary priority in terms of foreign relations is ties with Russia. We've seen that, of course, with support for Russia's war in Ukraine. We've seen it in the material assistance that North Korea has been providing. We've seen it in the form of high-level visits by senior Russian personnel, including the chief of Russia's intelligence services, economic delegations between the two countries. All of this is reinforcing the strategic cooperation. I think Xi Jinping's announcement today is designed to try and reduce some of that tension and provide reassurance to the North Koreans that China is still supporting broadly North Korea's goals. But at the same time, there's no doubt that it wants to try and limit North Korea's provocations. The challenge for China, of course, is that North Korea is not historically likely to, as it's demonstrated in the past, likely to respond well to those sorts of pressures.
So we are seeing some signs of strain in Pyongyang-Beijing relations as Kim Jong-un entered a new chapter with President Putin and as North Korea keeps seeking moves that could go against China's national interests. Now, Dr. Go, North Korea's relentless trash balloon campaign continued on Sunday for the fifth straight day in a row. What is North Korea aiming for? What is it trying to gain from it? And how do you assess the level of South Korea's response?
Well, I think North Korea is trying to maintain a certain level of tension in the Korean Peninsula, and then also North Korea always tries to maintain initiative when it comes to the overall security situation. So I think North Korea knows that this is essentially an asymmetric warfare. It's not easy for South Korea to respond to trash balloons, say, with kinetic force. So North Korea is exploiting this relentlessly, I would say. And I mean, South Korean side, so their hands are tied. And the reason is because the overall damage that the trash balloons from North Korea is causing is pretty minimal. So it's been reported that there's been 51 reports of damages caused by falling trash and debris from North Korea. But then the overall economic damage from this instance only amounts to like less than $100,000 or so. So it could be considered to be big or small. In the overall scheme of things, it's a pretty small figure. And there hasn't been, luckily, no, say, like injuries or like, God forbid, a loss of life from this kind of provocations by North Korea. So this is squares into this overall picture of North Korea maintaining provocation level below the threshold of armed response by South Korea. So I think North Korea, I think, is using this in lieu of a much more serious form of provocation, such as a missile test. It's been almost like an annual exercise on the part of North Korea to launch missiles for on the occasion of major events in North Korea, such as on September 9th, the anniversary of the State Foundation Day in North Korea. But instead, they are sending trash balloons. So you have to like weigh the pros and cons of this change of approach by North Korea. It's bothersome, but at the same time, it's keeping the overall level of tension low. So yeah, in that sense, it's a mixed picture. But I think overall, the situation remains pretty much stable in the Korean Peninsula, I would say.
So it's using it in a tactical way. The damage caused by the trash balloon campaign, as you pointed out, is less than 100,000 US dollars. So I guess we could say that's minimal, and more above all, it didn't cause any critical injuries or casualties or fatalities.
Exactly.
And so North Korea is using it in a tactical way. South Korea and the U.S. held a high-level nuclear deterrence strategy meeting in Washington, D.C., where they conducted their first tabletop simulation of nuclear consultative group, better known as NCG. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we see similar drills in the past? What's the significance of this particular tabletop simulation?
So I think it's clearly a difference in terminology. So one is TTX, tabletop exercise. Now we're talking about tabletop simulation. So it really depends on how the stakeholders define what TTS is. And according to both South Korea and the U.S. governments, TTS is essentially an enlarged form of TTS is an enlarged form of TTX. So it involves more simulation, but I think it involves more like a real components, meaning real action on the part of different parts of the military as well as the agencies in the both governments. So overall, the way the governments have jointly described the TTS was that it was like a more like an actualization of the responses, that hypothetical responses to potential North Korean nuclear attack. And this is exactly what the South Korean government has been demanding U.S. governments to do for to ensure that the South Korean public and the South Korean nation remain assured by the extended deterrence commitment of the U.S. government. So the idea is that there's like the notion of extended deterrence and also as a nuclear assurance by the U.S. government, and with each step of actualizing the responses for real measures, such as the use, redeploying the strategic assets, such as nuclear bombers and submarines and so forth. It gives credibility to the commitment that the U.S. government has made to the South Korean government. So in this case, what really matters is not just the scale, but also the frequency of these actions. So you asked correctly that what's the difference between TTX and TTS, but I think going beyond the terminology, I think we should be looking at the frequency of these exercises, and then also as the scale of the same. And so the South Korea and the U.S. governments are expanding both the scale and frequencies, and this shows that there's an investment by the U.S. government in defending South Korea. This message is getting across to the South Korean public and South Korean government, and also to Pyongyang and China. And so all this combined leads to the more and more formation of the commitment, the credibility, and assurance. And I think it's exactly the effect that the South Korean and the U.S. governments would like to have. And in that sense, I think we should look beyond the terminology and more about the content, I would say.
And Dr. Nilsson-Wright, North Korea was quick to slam Seoul and Washington's first nuclear tabletop simulation, calling it nuclear blackmail. It vowed to continue to take practical measures for long-term nuclear confrontation with the U.S. What is your assessment of the intensity of North Korea's response? And do you expect further provocations from the North other than flying trash balloons?
Well, I agree with Dr. Go. I think what we're seeing in the immediate response from the North Koreans is to focus on a declaratory, rhetorical rebuttal, if you like. The North has talked of war hysteria in the South and in the United States. They've said ominously that South Korea and the United States will pay a, quote, heavy price for their exercises. But I think the practical reality is that North Korea can't afford to do anything that would really escalate the situation on the Korean Peninsula, which is why the trash balloon response has been the preferred option. But it's important for them to speak tough, if you like, both to reinforce their own deterrence credibility, but also, I think, shore up public opinion at home. We've seen reports, of course, of flooding in the northwest of the country. Kim Jong-un has had to address that issue. I think in the short term, what we will see is probably more of the same in terms of emphasizing military preparedness. Over the weekend, the North Korean news services released photographs of Kim Jong-un visiting a coastal site to talk about the importance of building up the North Korean Navy. There's been a lot of speculation about how far North Korea can go in developing a new class of submarines to enhance its naval capabilities. Kim has talked very deliberately about developing coastal facilities to ensure that North Korea's maritime defenses are reinforced. He's visited an artillery officers training school. There have been photographs of him inspecting maps that seem to suggest a series of tactical and strategic plans that the North Korean leader wishes to highlight. And there's even been, coming back to that kind of perennial question about what sort of provocations the North might engage in. There's been talk of perhaps developing another generation of long-range ICBMs, photographs suggesting that there are new capabilities that may be in the pipeline. President Kim has, of course, committed that by the end of 2025, North Korea will have an even more powerful ICBM capability with a range of some 15,000 kilometers intended to strike at the United States and further afield. No evidence to suggest that this is an immediate prospect. And of course, we have on the horizon the November presidential election in the United States. Kim, I suspect, will not want to do anything that might in any way indirectly undermine Donald Trump's prospects as the Republican candidate in those elections. So we will see, I think, more of a war of words and these low-level provocations while doubling down on the commitment to build up North Korea's defense capabilities.
And staying with you, Dr. Nilsson-Wright, Kim Jong-un appears to have executed several officials, holding them responsible over flood disaster damage, according to Seoul's intelligence agency. What are the implications of this? Is Kim resuming reign of terror?
Reign of terror, I think, is perhaps overstretching the definition. I mean, he is, of course, a brutal leader, and the National Intelligence Service of South Korea has understandably been looking into these reports and highlighting the suggestion that Kim has been willing to exact brutal punishment on those officials associated with the flood damage. It's very hard at this stage to be clear about whether those reports are in fact accurate. We do know from the public testimony of defectors, high-level defectors, the counselor of the North Korean embassy in Cuba recently surfaced in South Korea to suggest that there was a great deal more anxiety amongst senior North Korean officials at what seems to be a more punitive response on the part of the North Korean leadership. Tae Yong-ho, of course, one of the most high-level defectors from the DPRK, formerly deputy ambassador at the North Korean embassy in the United Kingdom, and now heading up the very important Unification Committee, thanks to the support from President Yoon. Mr. Tae has himself also emphasized that there are suggestions that more senior-level officials from the DPRK, concerned about the brutal nature of the regime, may be looking at perhaps finding ways to escape from the country. Again, we should take all of those reports, I think, somewhat cautiously, but there's no doubt that this is a regime that is tightly controlled, and Kim's own track record suggests that this is a man who is prepared to exact real and very severe punishments on those officials around him who are seen not to be performing adequately.
Dr. Go, Russia has secured more than 1,600 containers of munitions and other military supplies from North Korea since Kim Jong-un last visited Russia last September. What's your analysis of this, and what do you think North Korea received in return?
Well, there are a couple of things that North Korea gained from this transaction. First of all, it's like a financial revenue, like a payoff that they gained through transferring these munitions to North Korea. There's been recently a study by my own colleagues at the Institute for National Security Strategy tried to estimate the overall revenue stream that North Korea gains through this transaction. And according to the study, it just estimated that North Korea made up to $1 billion by selling these antiquated and outdated artillery shells and weapon systems to Russia. So $1 billion actually is a huge sum of money for a country like North Korea. We're talking about a country of a GDP of estimated to be around 20 billion. So 1/20th of the overall national domestic product was actually created by through the sale of munitions to Russia. And also, overall North Korea's trade level is pretty low. So in a good year, North Korea exports around $3 billion worth of products and services. So $1 billion is a huge money. So clearly, it's a major bonanza for the Kim Jong-un regime. But we don't see that reflected on the ground and the raising living standards of the North Korean people. Chances that North Korea is spending the money to procure weapon systems and components for their WMD program. So this goes to the flip side of the transaction. So the question is, so the 16,000 containers went to Russia. So did they come back to North Korea empty or not? So also it's likely that Russians filled up those containers with something. Could be food, could be other goods, more like a benign source of goods, such as consumer goods, oil maybe. But then also there's some likelihood that Russians fill those containers with weapons and high-tech components to manufacturing missiles, such as the intercontinental ballistic missiles, as well as the submarine-launched ballistic missiles. So this is the dimension of this transaction that we are most concerned about. We, meaning South Korea, United States, and other like-minded states. So this is something that could be translated to major leap in North Korea's strategic capabilities in the coming years, something that we are watching very closely.
All right, we have a few more grounds to cover, but due to time limit, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Dr. Go, for your presence with us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And many thanks to you as well, Dr. Nilsson-Wright, as always, for your insights.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.